What are the latest AFC news and notes coming across from training camp, and what does that mean for fantasy football in 2022? We have the updates and the upgrades for you here as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com, getting you ready for the 2022 season. We'll have all kinds of rankings that you could imagine there. We're going to have fantasy rankings, reality rankings, sleepers, busts. I'll have my do not draft list early next week. Up there, you can check out my rookie rankings as well as my snake draft strategy article. So check all that out at SportingNews.com. Here on Locked On Fantasy Football, as promised, we're going to catch up you on the AFC news and notes. We'll do this for the NFC as well. This is what you need to know to upgrade, downgrade players. Just understand different situations as we work toward our fantasy football drafts. Bump up some guys, drop down a few guys, think about what's going on and what its impact could be here for redraft leagues. We'll get into all that good stuff. We'll go alphabetical order, start with the Baltimore Ravens, and I'll head all the way to the Tennessee Titans on today's show. So we'll cover all 16 AFC teams today. We'll hit the latest news and notes from the NFC teams tomorrow. Before we do that, I have to tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Really proud to have them as a sponsor here on the network. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. They have a special offer for my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, it is time to begin the show, and we'll start with the Baltimore Ravens and an update here on them. Lamar Jackson is having a pretty good camp quietly. There's no questions about his health. There are some questions about when he'll get his big contract, but he'll wait it out now that Tyler Murray has signed his massive extension with the Cardinals. So no rush for Lamar Jackson. The Ravens want to get done at some point. So does Jackson, and he represents himself here. So he's wise to wait out the market. He's fine. He's going to be motivated to have that big year and really earn that massive contract here. And he's already won the MVP once. So we know what level he can play at. They're producing in reality and delivering in fantasy as well for us. So Lamar Jackson, still pretty good value there as right now the quarterback 4 on the board in fantasy football. At running back, J.K. Dobbins says he's ready and his knee is good to go, but they're being very careful with Dobbins. That's a good sign where they're not trying to rush him back into action from that knee injury. Gus Edwards is behind him. You also have Mike Davis added for some insurance here. Justice Hill, however, has had a very impressive training camp, getting some reps here, obviously with Dobbins on the shelf, Edwards on the mend here. Dobbins is lobbying to play, but the Ravens are very careful. So he says he's a little bit advanced on his recovery. The Ravens want to play it safe. We are appreciative of that, so that he's healthy there for week 1 of the regular season. That's all that matters right now. But Justice Hill making a case that he should be still on this roster and be that swing number 3 ahead of Mike Davis, who didn't really do anything with the Falcons last year, got displaced by Cordarrelle Patterson in that backfield. So we feel good about Dobbins being on track. A lot of people are telling you to avoid Dobbins in fantasy football drafts. You just have to wait and see where he lands. If he's a lower end RB2 or a borderline flex, I think that's a good value for Dobbins at this very moment. All right, we go from Baltimore to Buffalo, and the Gabriel Davis hype is real here, folks. And I think with that situation, I really like that Gabriel Davis is established as a number 2, and now Jamison Crowder is battling some injuries as well. So a lot of interesting things going on with the Bills and their situation here at wide receiver, that it's a big transition from what they had last year around Stephon Diggs with Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders. They move on with Gabriel Davis and Crowder here. And interesting that Crowder has not been able to stay on the field here early in practices. So Crowder's definitely the designated slot guy. They're very confident in Davis as the new number 2. Isaiah McKenzie getting a little bit more buzz and run here in the slot with Crowder struggling. So something to watch there. Crowder can't practice right now, so that's been a hard thing for him coming over from his latest team. So look at that situation. Then we also look at the backfield. Zach Moss is trying to hold on to some kind of role here, but Devin Singletary's gotten the majority of the first team reps, so he's established himself pretty solid as an RB2 here. You also have James Cook. They really like his receiving ability, and I think you'll see a strong role for him here as well in that capacity. So if Moss is a bit of a factor, it cools off on Cook. I think the only way Cook has real strong standalone value is if Singletary has to miss time. But they're going to try to get him involved, but there are a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. We just mentioned a couple, Davis and McKenzie on top of Diggs, and then if Crowder's in the mix. So Cook just might see some limited work there. You also have not factored in Dawson Knox and O.J. Howard at tight end. So a lot of players to throw the ball to, and if Moss is going to be a factor and get some swing work there behind Singletary, that's going to limit what James Cook can do here as a rookie. All right, we go from Baltimore and Buffalo to Cincinnati, and we have interesting situation with Joe Burrow not missing time recovering from an ACL, but an appendectomy. So getting a little bit of rest, but he knows this offense of Zach Taylor inside and out. No worries there. Samaj Pirine is also on the mend a little bit, but they have kept him as a key backup. He is the primary and premier handcuff there to Joe Mixon, so still not losing that status. Interesting that the Bengals really upgraded their offensive line, but both of those players, La'el Collins, the right tackle, Alex Kappa, their new guard, both hurting a little bit. So Kappa played with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers last year. We know Collins helped Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. So some good upgrades there. I think everything of the Bengals is just feeling good. Just keep up the vibes from last year. So they might struggle a little bit to win as many games, but the Burrow and Jamar Chase connection is there. T. Higgins is still your number 2 outside. Tyler Boyd, they're working as the slot receiver. Mixon back by Pirine, and instead of CJ Uzama, you basically have Hayden Hurst in that role now, and feeling pretty comfortable about his spot in the offense here as the primary blocking and limited receiving tight end for the Bengals. All right, so that's one Ohio team and 2 in the AFC North. Let's get to our third team in the AFC North in this segment. We are going to discuss the Cleveland Browns. We know their biggest news of the week was the Deshaun Watson suspension of 6 games, missing the first 6 games here on the schedule. But the appeal has been made by the NFL. And guess who hears the appeal? It's the NFL. Roger Goodell will be the ultimate determining factor on how many games Watson will miss. They're pushing for a full season. Will it land on 8 games? Will it be pushed up to 12? We don't know for sure. There are a lot of factors here. But for now, Deshaun Watson, we did the special. If you missed that, what you should do with Deshaun Watson, working with a 6-game suspension. Now, if it goes up to 12, 16, obviously Deshaun Watson really falls off the board here as someone that we're going to look at. 8 games, we can still revisit and have a contingency plan and try to have him for the back half of the season for on-the-field performance here in 2022. But Deshaun Watson, still wide range of outcomes that could be there. This appeal could take long where Watson could be out in the field early. So a lot of things that we want to watch out here with the Watson situation. It's messy. The NFL hasn't handled it well. Watson is still trying to figure out what's going to go on, and it's just something we're going to wait and see. And if you must go down with the Deshaun Watson route and want to make it work on your fantasy football team, we did that, break that down in full on our previous show. So check that out on our archives. Amari Cooper is a little bit banged up. There's some concerns about this quarterback transition and question with Jacoby Brissett and Deshaun Watson, but he is the dominant number 1 right now. There's some other injury issues that have popped up at wide receiver. Anthony Schwartz is battling a knee injury. So there's not a lot there. Donovan Peoples-Jones is your number 2. The rookie David Bell from Purdue is your number 3. So they're limited targets to go around here, and we just know that Cooper is going to dominate them no matter who's out there. We talked about that. The short-term intermediate passing game, Cooper, David Njoku, Kareem Hunt, playing off that strong running game with Nick Chubb. That's going to be a lot of the Browns' offense this year for the games that they do not have Deshaun Watson. All right, the final team we'll talk about in this segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football for our AFC News and Notes show out of training camp. The Denver Broncos, a lot of buzz about them, a lot of things that happened to the Broncos. Russell Wilson, still looking good. They're giving him a lot of autonomy in the offense with Nathaniel Hackett and Justin Outten. He's going to set tempo, so maybe that let Russ cook thing that we had in Seattle is going to play out a little bit more in Denver. We are a little bit concerned there with Javonte Williams. We know he's extremely talented, but they did bring back Melvin Gordon. It is notable, however, that Javonte Williams is getting the key first-team starter reps here. So Melvin Gordon still seen as that change of pace second guy to help in those third down situations with his blocking, some pass catching, some red zone running. But Javonte Williams, I think it's early to just be totally down on him because of the Gordon return. He's someone you're wary of drafting too high, but as an RB2 who had that strong status sharing with Gordon last year, you feel good about them and Williams getting a lot of run here with the ones for the Broncos. Now, the Broncos did suffer a big injury here. Tim Patrick, they signed him to a nice contract there. Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy as the third receiver really operated more like the number two and number one at times with Sutton on the shelf and Jeudy struggling last year. He's out of the mix. He had a torn ACL here. So interesting that the fifth round pick, Montrell Washington, a rookie out of Samford, is really impressed in camp. And this has also been tied to KJ Hamler having a hip injury and returning from that. So an opportunity is opening up for a third wide receiver in Denver, but this also could boost Sutton and Judy's value here, where you have only two wideouts with some reliable experience there with Patrick out of the mix. And it also bumps up the role a bit of Albert Ukabanim. And you also look at their young tight end that they got out of UCLA, Greg Dulcich. We'll see how they work him in. But Albert O could see a bigger part of this offense here. Again, Washington has inexperience. Hamler has been limited in his contributions on the field without Deshaun Hamilton. So, again, a third option would say this is playing out to Albert O a little bit more in this offense for Denver. All right, there you have the latest news and notes coming out of 5 of the 16 AFC teams in the early part of training camp ahead of the preseason. We will get to 11 more, and we'll get to the entire AFC on today's show. We'll do the entire NFC on tomorrow's show. The news, notes, upgrades, and updates that you need for fantasy football. Before we dive into our next wave of teams, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor ready. It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, Built has done this again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite cookie dough chunk puffs. Have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. It's all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories. They have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It'll be the perfect treat. Or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them all for yourself. We won't tell. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. Chocolate-covered cookie dough with light, fluffy texture. So good. And what's great about Built is that all their Built bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you need a snack for your workout, late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite while on the go, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Dish of calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to Built.com to get in the cookie dough chunk puffs. Now, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, we will continue the show here, Locked On Fantasy Football, as we break down the AFC news and notes, what's important to know coming out of training camp so far. Let's move to the Houston Texans, a team with not a lot of fantasy football buzz here. They had a tough situation with John Mechie, their rookie talented receiver out of Alabama, diagnosed with leukemia, unfortunately, so he'll be missing the season. With their young tight ends, there's been a development as well that Brevin Jordan has fallen behind Pharaoh Brown. I'm not sure I'm going to buy too much of that. I think Jordan is the better receiver, but right now, if they're in blocking situations and they weren't using two tight ends, Pharaoh Brown would be the guy in there for the Texans offense. So something notable there. And we will save the best here for last. Davis Mills needs more weapons other than Brandon Cooks here. The tight ends are in flux. The wide receiver core is not going to have Mechie. Nico Collins, however, is a big part of what they want to do. He's got nice size on the outside, the Michigan product. Cooks is going to draw plenty of attention. Davis Mills has a big arm. So Nico Collins still having some buzz as a sleeper wide receiver. I wouldn't say that he's a guy we're going to rely upon yet as a consistent wide receiver 3, but definitely on the radar here as a wide receiver 5 with a bullet that might really have some upside here with the Texans being a high volume passing offense by necessity. The running game, they're still trying to find answers between Marlon Mack, Rex Burkhead, and the rookie Dameon Pierce. The defense stinks, so they're going to have to maybe chuck it in a lot of these games. So when you look at that, Nico Collins, pretty firm number 2 here. Some question marks about the 3 wide receiver. And you also look at the tight ends, maybe a little bit of split there. So interesting that you might see Nico Collins kind of emerge as that number 1 where his body is built for that here in this offense. The Colts kind of are preparing all the receivers to have a big role with Matt Ryan. So far, the reviews for Matt Ryan and Frank Reich offense are very good. They like his control, and that's what Carson Wentz did not provide last year. They like a pocket passer who's going to play within the framework of the offense, go through his progressions, not improvise and get too crazy. And that's what you're going to see with Matt Ryan. So he might not be exciting because he doesn't run for us, but Paris Campbell and Matt Ryan have developed a good relationship as well as Alec Pierce. That's really good. The rookie out of Cincinnati, he's considered to be the field stretcher on the outside. Makes a lot of sense. His size and speed says he should do that. Paris Campbell worked in the slot. Michael Pittman can pretty much be anywhere. He's now a classic outside guy, but he can also be a big slot for this team. So they're trying to make these guys interchangeable, this offense. So right now, this offense runs through Jonathan Taylor, and it's a defensive-minded team there. They are the favorites in the AFC South, but just keep in mind, they're still not going to be an open it up and throw it all over the park team. It's not a necessary thing in this division in the games there. There's not going to be a lot of high-scoring games, so keep that in mind. Pierce is going to have that occasional flash with a big play downfield. Campbell making the big plays after the catch. Pittman being the only source of consistent production there, and it's a wide receiver 1 who's based on his size to use in the red zone and rack up touchdowns. So just keep that in mind. But the Colts may have a more competent passing game, we think, with Ryan, Campbell, and Pierce flanking Pittman, a very good offensive line, and the running game setting things up in play action and downfield as well. So don't sleep on the Colts passing game with what weapons they have in their remixed attack. Now we turn our attention to another AFC South team, the Jaguars, and we'll look at their backfield. Travis Etienne has had a big training camp coming back from his torn ACL, did not play it down in his rookie season, went down before that. He didn't get a chance to show his worth next to his Clemson teammate, Trevor Lawrence, there, but he's looked outstanding. He's working to carve himself a big role here. Interesting that James Robinson, perhaps motivated by the fact that Etienne is out there and playing and back, coming off an Achilles injury. He's also worked in camp as well. So a lot of the offense, I still think, with the Jaguars are going to run through these 2 guys. I know they have Christian Kirk and some other weapons, including Zay Jones, in the downfield passing game to try to help Trevor Lawrence be whispered a little bit in the Doug Peterson offense. But you look at Etienne and Robinson, that's where the bread is going to be buttered most for the Jaguars. So Etienne, I wouldn't feel super confident as an RB2, but in that RB2 flex borderline, that's a good way to target here. Jaguars running back. Unfortunately, we won't get to see him in action in the Hall of Fame game. So limited action that we're going to see in the preseason. But we don't want to see Etienne out there to have a little more confidence. But loads of talent with this kid. First-round pick. A lot of Alvin Kamara in his skill set here for Jacksonville. We go from Houston, Indianapolis, Jacksonville to the AFC West and Kansas City. Not a lot of buzz so far with their wide receivers. Sky Moore, a little bit banged up. He's the guy that we're excited for the upside and trying to replace Tyreek Hill. Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling still make up the top of the depth chart, but we know things are wide open behind Travis Kelce being the go-to guy for Patrick Mahomes. So we'll watch that carefully. But Sky Moore needs a little bit of time back here, and we need to hear a little bit more buzz about him to feel comfortable and just assume that he's going to shoot up the depth chart here with some accomplished veterans ahead of him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we heard that offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy want to make Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Chiefs do, a key part of what they want to do. So maybe a shot here to have a lead role. They do have Ronald Jones, and Definitely CH was disappointing. Darrell Williams be very effective in fantasy. He's, however, in Arizona and clouding that backfield behind James Conner. So Edwards-Helaire, the opportunities there. He's also a first-round pick with some pedigree that we can look at. And the Chiefs need to just give him the ball there. And a former running back, Eric Bieniemy at Colorado, still on the team with his mindset without Mike Kafka there as the quarterback's coach, and maybe a little bit more run-oriented here to take pressure off Patrick Mahomes. So we'll watch that. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think they need to establish him as that power back because it hasn't really worked out in his receiving strength role from LSU. We stay in the AFC West again, and we'll go for a triplet of teams there. The next one is the Raiders that we break down. Josh McDaniels has gotten wacky with his backfield depth chart already. Brandon Bolden, his former favorite Patriot there in the mix behind Josh Jacobs. You also hear that Kenyon Drake is going to have a key role here in some capacity, and you have Zamir White. We'll see how it plays out a little bit here in the preseason, that breakdown of the backfield, but a lot of crowd that's definitely developing here for the Raiders, and we need to see that sort out a little bit to feel more comfortable about Josh Jacobs right now. Got to target him as an RB2, no higher, no lower than that, based on his feature situation, his first-round pedigree, kind of when we look at Etienne and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. All right, we will move on to the Chargers. This is the last team we'll tackle in this segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Some interesting developments in their downfield passing game. We know about Keenan Allen, getting a little bit older, but still very good and top-flight receiver here in the NFL. Mike Williams established himself, got that big contract. Who's the number 3 here? Clearly Joshua Palmer, separating himself from Jalen Guyton and others here. So he's got some upside in this downfield passing game. We talked about him a little bit when we broke down the key questions for the Chargers. We also mentioned a little bit of Donald Parham Jr., but I think it's real that he might compete for a key job here. Gerald Everett is your starting tight end right now on the depth chart, but they really like Parham, some explosive ability there from tight end. So could really expand the repertoire here for Justin Herbert. So Herbert gets a solidified bump up here with these weapons, Parham and Palmer on top of Allen Williams. So really like that. And Austin Eckler in the backfield, of course, another secret weapon here in the passing game for Herbert. So a lot of good stuff here and good vibes all around from the Chargers. Isaiah Spiller, you don't have to worry too much about him cutting into Eckler's role. He's pretty much a number 2 right now. He's going to probably steal all that volume that was there with guys like Kalen Ballage and Justin Jackson here, usurping that from their other backs here, namely Joshua Kelly and Larry Roundtree. So he's going to be the top power back on this team and complement Eckler and maybe give Eckler a breather, but they're very calculated with Eckler's touches. They a lot of them come in the passing game as well. So I think a good opportunity for Spiller to maybe get a few touchdowns, have some relevance that way in that standard flex potential category here. But again, the Chargers offense looking good all around that can do a little bit of everything. And the offensive line upgrade as well. You have Corey Linsley and Rashawn Slater. It has really gone to a high level here. So the Chargers can pretty much get anything done offensively. I'm really excited to have good shares of them in fantasy football in 2022. All right, so we've broken down several teams here now in the AFC. We got 5 more to go. So 11 down, 5 more to go here with our AFC news and notes, upgrades, and updates for you on today's show. We do have one last segment to get to. We'll get to the Dolphins, Patriots, Jets, Steelers, and Titans and break down their latest news and notes there. But before we do that, I have to tell you about an exciting new sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. And with BetterHelp, that's exactly what you're going to get. BetterHelp for your life. Now, life is always difficult. There's things that come up unexpectedly. We're trying to manage work and life, and it can get really challenging, the twists and turns that come with our life. So the one thing we have to do is know it's important to show up for ourselves through it all. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. I really benefit from therapy on a regular basis. It just kind of grounds me, keeps my life in check, and puts it in the right direction. And BetterHelp is going to do that for you. And you should definitely get in on therapy if it's something that you feel can complete your life. And I think it can complete everyone's life here. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to. And getting therapy every week is as easy as a few clicks on your laptop or phone. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you. BetterHelp makes it easy and free to change therapists if needed. It's more affordable than national offline therapy, and financial aid is available as well. BetterHelp is a great way to invest in yourself. Visit their website, read their testimonials that are posted daily. There's so many rave reviews, and therapy is an important part and essential in a lot of people's lives. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. And they have a special offer for you, my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy only at BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp, betterhelp.com/locked-on. All right, it is time to close the show and looking at some news and notes from the AFC. There's a few more teams from the AFC East, one from the North and one from the South. The Miami Dolphins are up first. Tua Tagovailoa, good reviews in camp overall. There's some confidence in him that he can make it work. Tyreek Hill being the apple of his eye, Jalen Waddle fading for that reason, so something to watch there. And Raheem Mostert still on the mend here for Mike McDaniel in that 49ers style of offense here. So Chase Edmonds in really good position to produce here for the Dolphins. The Patriots backfield has been buzzing like crazy because you have James White out with a hip injury. So when you look at that situation here, it's been rather special for the Patriots to have Rhamondre Stevenson. He's really stepped up. Damian Harris is someone that has held on to the job, but he's been on the trade block. They wanted to move him a little bit. So I think you look at what you get from the Patriots backfield. And Rhamondre Stevenson, the buzz is real. He can do it all. He's a good power back, explosive out of Oklahoma, good pedigree, and can catch the ball well. So really carving out a nice role for Rhamondre Stevenson to help Mac Jones, who's played really well here. The Jets have a buzzy player, too, in year two. It's Elijah Moore, the wide receiver. He's going up and getting everything. He's, by all accounts, the number one wide receiver in Jets training camp, ahead of Corey Davis and the rookie there, Garrett Wilson. So very excited to see what Elijah Moore can do there in New York in year two. For the Steelers, Mitchell Trubisky falling flat. He's looking pretty bad here in the quarterback battle for them. So that's a concern, but that also could open the door for Kenny Pickett. I think his online accuracy, his athleticism, all those things are really good that you look at on the deep ball. That's going to help receivers such as Deontay Johnson. He's happier now that he has a contract. Chase Claypool battling through some injuries. George Pickens looking like a impact player potentially out of the big slot. So maybe Kenny Pickett will bring all these three guys together. So something to watch there. In Pittsburgh, if now Kenny Pickett is the favorite to win the job, Trubisky, again, that's what we've seen in the reps, but we'll see how it plays out in the preseason games. And finally, we're looking at the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry still looking good in this offense. You have Treylon Burks here and Robert Woods. Those are the new guys in the passing game. So that's the remix passing game. Burks is still a better value than Woods, but Woods looking healthy, Henry looking healthy, and that's good news here for the Titans and their offense, and maybe a little bit more upside than we think in the passing game with Ryan Tannehill and one Malik Willis if he gets that opportunity in this offense. So there you have it. There's your latest AFC news and notes here that we broke down for you on today's show, what it means for fantasy football. Updates, upgrades, downgrades. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first one today. Now make your second listen to the Locked On NFL podcast. Our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with biggest stories, the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal break in the action. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time with a breakdown of the NFC news and notes.